Well, last week we looked at the logical reasons why you can believe that heaven is real, and we also looked at the fact that it really hinges on where we got the idea in the first place, because we asked, where does the average Westerner get the idea that at the funeral there's someone up there smiling down upon us? We looked through the different religions and philosophies and all these sorts of things, and we found there is not a universal idea of heaven in all of the religions, not as far as the person individually up there smiling down upon us. The Eastern religions have an afterlife, they have belief in they have heavens and hells and all these sort of things, but not a personal ongoing existence. That is, you've got, like, even in reincarnation, whatever ends up at the end, which one is it? Who is it? It's not one person who's going on. Nirvana, we looked at, means extinction from the self, so there's no personal ongoing existence. Then we looked at Islam and said, yes, Islam has the idea of a heaven, but where did it get the idea from? And we traced it back and say, well, hang on, the Quran claims it's a follow-on from what? From the Bible, where did Islam, where did everybody get the idea, the Western world get the idea of this idea of a personal ongoing existence in the afterlife? It came down to Jesus. And if you remember, we asked there for, if that unbeliever says they believe they're going to heaven, we'd ask them, where did you get the idea? You got it from Jesus, whether you thought about it or not. If you got an idea, wouldn't it be a good idea to check with the owner of the joint before you presume you got your room booked? And then we also concluded that the only way that we could know that heaven's real is if God showed up in person on this earth and told us. Otherwise, we're all just coming up with our own ideas. And we looked at the fact we've been going through this Gospel of John, and we've seen that's exactly what Jesus has been claiming for himself. So we were left with the conclusion either the Pharisees are right, Jesus is a deceiver or a madman, or Jesus told the truth, in which case God did come down in person and tell us there is such a place as heaven, and he's been telling us specifically in this text. We also noted last week the most significant thing about heaven is the fact that God is there. People think I'm going on to heaven, but they forget God is there. That's the actual whole point of heaven, God being with his people. So if you don't want to know God in this life, why would you think that you're going to enjoy or even get to heaven if you're not interested in God in this life? And we noted more than that. We even saw that heaven actually comes down to earth. God's going to dwell with his people. The return to paradise with God walking with his people. And that's the whole point of what Jesus has come to do, to restore that to that point, that personal relationship. He's going to wipe every tear from their eyes. He's going to, there'll be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. So direct fellowship. And we see this through the scriptures, not only reunion with others who have gone on to be with the Lord, but also direct fellowship through the Gospels. For instance, in Matthew 8 verse 11, Jesus said, I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. So can you picture that feast? There's something real personal, connecting, relational about that. And that comes out in our text, and that's why I thought we needed to spend another week in this. So let's look now at John 14 in verse 2. Jesus says, in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. So it's not just the fact that you got a room booked that makes it the eternal blessedness, but the fact that Jesus has personally prepared it and you're going to actually be with him. And you see the closeness, the personal closeness of this in the next verse, in verse 3. And Jesus says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. And that's that whole thing of we're going to be together. So Jesus, just think about this. If you're a believer this morning, Jesus has prepared a place for you, a place where you can actually be with him. And in that new dimension, our bodies will be perfect. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. There'll be no more evidence of the old infirmities. There'll be no more, I'll have a full head of hair. Everything will be perfect. But, except for one. Jesus, the nail marks and the hands and the side will still be there to remind us forever of what it cost God to prepare this room, for this whole new creation to be renovated and our bodies to be resurrected, what it cost God, the giving up of his only Son. And that will be part of heaven, the full expression of our gratitude for what God has done just to prepare this room so that we could be with him. But what does Jesus mean when he opens up in this text in chapter 14 verse 1 where he says, do not let your hearts be troubled? Well, to look at that, and that's what we really want to look at this week. What trouble? What's the problem? Well, look at the context. Remember the context. It was the time where Jesus, just before this, Jesus had told his disciples, I'm going away. And I'm going away, and where I'm going, you can't come. So this must have been a shock for them. They've travelled with Jesus for 3 years. They've given up everything. These guys left their businesses behind, the fishing business. Matthew left all that juicy money in the tax collector's booth. They left everything. They've invested their life into following Jesus, and they've been with him for 3 years. They've seen the power, and all this is, this power and everything is because Jesus is there with them. And now he says, and by the way, I'm leaving and you can't come. They're troubled. They're worried. This is not only the trouble that they're worried about what might happen, but Jesus already predicted that, Peter, you're going to fall. In fact, all of you are going to desert me. And they're thinking, man, Peter, he's the bold one. He's the one who would, walk on water if Jesus asked him to. And he's going to fall. What hope have the rest of us got? And now he's leaving. This is devastating. Trouble ahead, trials ahead, sin ahead when Peter's going to deny Jesus. How are we going to get through this without Jesus? In fact, by the time Jesus finishes this speech, he actually is going to tell them that you've got a whole lot of trouble, not just the immediate future, but your whole life is going to be faced with trouble. Right near the end of this speech that he makes in John chapter 16 verse 33, Jesus said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. So in this world, you'll have trouble. Literally, in the older translation, in this world, you will have tribulation. You're going to be facing tribulation. That's what Jesus' final words to his disciples before he goes on then to the cross and his ascension and leaves them, physically leaves them. But hey, but don't let your heart be troubled. It's all right. How can he say that? How can he say that? Jesus is describing what life, not only for the disciples, this is a living word that speaks to every believer, to everyone who listened to it, that in this broken world, we're going to have trouble. This is not home. I've told you about home. I'm going to prepare that place for you. That's home. This is not home. In this broken world, you will have trouble. And of course, even though we'll have good times, we'll have the blessings of all that God's given us, there will be trouble. And Jesus is not going to be physically here with us during this time. It's almost as though he doesn't want us to get too comfy here in this place. There's something missing in this broken world. Even through all the blessings and all the things we can be grateful for, there's still something missing until we're in that room that Jesus has prepared for us. The Apostle Paul puts it this way in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 4. He says, "For while we're in this tent, in this body, we groan and are burdened because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling." We're looking forward to that room. There's something in us that says there's something missing for all the joys and blessings of this world. Now, here he is warning that what's ahead for the Christian is tribulation. But of course, whether you're a believer or you're an unbeliever, you're going to go through this trouble. You're going to go through different troubles. It's just a fact of this broken world that sometimes people, including Christian people, never really come to grips with. It's like they even get upset and angry. Why are things going so wrong? Why is this, whether it's a health issue, a trial issue, an emotional issue, whatever it is, there's something wrong here. Well, yes, no, that's actually, there's something right. This is exactly the way it's meant to be. This is a broken world. This is a fallen world. Years ago, I heard a talk by an American preacher called Louis Giglio. I was trying to find it on the internet. I couldn't find it again, but I remember an illustration from it. It was really helpful. He talked about a time relating the Christian walk to a time he was doing whitewater rafting down a major river, Colorado or something like that, and so paddling along and enjoying this beautiful scenery, and it was everything was, you know, the water's beautiful, the paddling's nice, and, you know, all the scenery around. And he said, and then we hit the rapids. And he goes, and all of a sudden, I'm paddling fast, and then I'm paddling desperately, and then I think I'm going to die in this, and I'm going to desperately for his life, thinking this is never going to end. And then he finally, when he's totally exhausted and thinks he's finished for sure, suddenly it goes calm again. Ah, boy, glad we got through that. Well, that's the end of that, isn't it? We won't have to worry about anything like that anymore. And then more rapids. And he goes, we're into it again. And the whole thing, he goes, I'm going to die. This time I cannot, this is beyond what I can bear. Can't do it. And then it goes calm again. And then more rapids, and so on and so on. And he said, that is what our lives are like. And some people never really come to grips with this. They're waiting for that time where that room that Jesus is talking about, where there's total peace and serenity, is supposed to happen in this life. Well, you got the wrong world. You're from another planet, because it ain't going to happen that way. It's not meant to be that way. And as Christians, if you can come to grips with our worldview of what this world is, it's broken, it's fallen, then instead of getting thrown by the rapids and going, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. No, this is the way it's supposed to be, and Jesus will get me through. Why? Because he has prepared a room for me. Now, what's the difference between the unbeliever who goes through the same sort of things and the believer who goes through these things? It's all in Jesus' last words that he leaves with the disciples before he leaves this earth, before he goes to the cross, resurrection, ascension, and leaves this world. Read it again with me in chapter 14, verse 1. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. Don't let your heart be troubled. Easy for you to say. Why? Well, take a look at what follows in the personal love and assurance that Jesus is attaching to these words. Does this sound like a God who is going to leave you in those rapids to fend for yourself, and you're not going to be able to get through because Jesus is not physically here? Does that sound like this Jesus when we read the following verses again, chapter 14, verse 2? In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you also may be where I am. So the same Jesus who just said, don't let your heart be troubled, is the same Jesus who's prepared a room. If I've gone to prepare a room for you, see, there's something totally illogical. If you've got living faith in Jesus this morning, there's something totally illogical about you thinking, I'm not going to make it, or I can't get through, or this is... You know why it's illogical? Because Jesus would be sitting up there in heaven going, man, I prepared this room, but they fell over. I got a spare room here. I don't know what to do with it. Right? It's illogical that Jesus would say these words after, do not let your heart be troubled, and I'm going to prepare. In other words, I've got the finish line covered. I've got it all worked out. Do you think I'm just going to let you fall over in the middle of this and leave that room vacant for eternity? It's part of a plan, and this whole thing is connected. You know, do you see the personal love in this when he says, I've got this room prepared for you? You know, it's like when some young people, they leave home and the parents say, you know, we've got a room here for you. If you need to come back, you know, maybe your parents weren't like that. This parent is. I've got a room for you and I'm waiting here for you. I'm waiting here for you. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Why? Because of this personal love. Jesus knew the rapids were ahead for these disciples, and they were going to go through some horrific trials, even to death. Jesus knows the rapids ahead for us. They will come. That's why he says this. Don't let your heart be troubled. Trust in me. Trust in me. Same God who, have we forgotten how he's already shown his love for us in that he sent his son to go through that horrific torture at the cross to pay the price of our sin. Therefore, if you are in Christ, you cannot be punished for your sin. Oh, I'm getting punished by God. Not if you've repented and believed in Jesus, you're not. You can't be punished twice for the same crime. Your punishment has already been taken away upon the cross. God can discipline you, God can shape you, God can refine you, God can do all kinds of things, but he won't punish you ever again if you've already been punished in Jesus. And if he's given you that personal love and then promised the finish line with that personal room and promised to come and take you to be with him. As he says in verse 3, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you also may be where I am. That again is him predicting the finish line. He's going to come back and take you to be with him. This final speech, as we'll work our way through in John's Gospel, we'll find that's also the same speech where Jesus says, even though he's physically going away, he's going to send his Spirit. So he's not actually leaving us. He's leaving us physically, but he's not leaving us because he's going to send his Spirit. He won't leave us or forsake us all the way until we're in that room. That's why he can say, do not let your heart be troubled. You know, some people struggle in the Christian life, but some people struggle with theological things. You know, I was talking to a group of students, year 12 students this last week, and they asked me, how can God be a generous God and yet have a hell? You know, and you know, of course there are good theological reasons for that, but you know, there are all kinds of theological things that people can struggle with. You know, difficult doctrines, predestination, God's judgment, all these sort of things. And of course, biblically we can unpack, and I did unpack with those students why hell is a good and right and fair thing, and if God didn't bring justice, then God would be loving evil and ignoring it, and so on. But the bottom line with things we don't understand is the same thing that Jesus is saying here. Trust in me. Who are you going to trust? Your own feelings? I don't think that feels fair. You know, I don't think that's right, or whatever. Or are you going to trust that maybe God knows more than you do? Same thing with our trials. Same thing with our temptations. You know, if you've gone through a particularly difficult time, or someone has been abused, or someone's been, you know, you've lost someone, you know, all these sorts of things. And there's no human words that can really comfort or strengthen in this situation. What is the bottom line? Where do we really turn to? And it's just this. Jesus' words. Trust in me. I know what I'm doing. I created this world. I created you. I prepared a room for you. Do you think I don't care? How are you going to manage? Someone sinned grievously against you? Trust in me. I know what I'm doing. I'll bring about what's right. Can you see Jesus sitting in that room waiting for you? This is the personal love, and all those things I couldn't understand. He'll explain them to you at the time. It was all right. He knew what he was doing. You know, this is such a big issue. It's the heart of the Christian faith when you really think about what caused this world to be in the mess that it's in now. What caused the whole ruin of the world? It's sin, of course, but what was the heart of the sin? What was the real problem? You know, God said, I've given you everything you could possibly need, and all the trees you can eat from, except for one. Don't eat that, you know. Don't eat from that tree. And what was the heart of the problem when Adam reached out his hand, took that fruit. What was the real heart of the problem? He didn't trust God. God said, don't do it, you'll die. Satan said, no, look, God's holding out on you. You know, he didn't want you to have all that knowledge that he's got, so come on. Don't trust God. Boom. And we read it earlier in Genesis 3, where they were expelled from paradise. Expelled. Why? Because they didn't trust God. The God who made them, the God who gave us everything. They didn't trust God. So what's the way back in to paradise? Your very salvation. What is it? Trust in God. Trust in what God's done to give us his Son to take away our sin, and accessed by what? Trusting in him. That's what real faith is. Trusting in God. Trusting when you fail, like these disciples are going to. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Get back up again. Trust in me. And that's why this really is the heart of the Christian faith, trusting in God. The whole world is totally, this is an actual enemy of the world. Because the world is trusting in themselves. You ask people, who are you trusting in? Oh, I trust myself. Yes, that's good. You trust yourself. What did Proverbs 28:26 say? He who trusts in himself is a fool. Not a good place to be. If we agree that we're imperfect, why on earth would you trust yourself? But think about it in relation to salvation. If I were to say, now, you would die tonight, and you're going to stand before God, he says, why would I let you in heaven? What are most people going to say to that? They're going to say, well, I've done my best. I've tried to be a good person. Or I've been a religious person. Or I've just tried to be, I'm not as bad as some other people. Problem with your eyes. Trusting in yourself, bottom line. That's what that is. That's what all that stuff is about. Me, I'm trusting in me, that somehow God would accept me. I trust I'm good enough. I trust in myself. And that's fatal. Even an unbeliever can see how ludicrous it is that as imperfect human beings we would dare to trust ourselves. Have we ever done anything wrong before? Yes. Ever thought you were right about something, turned out? Yes. And you trust yourself? But also for salvation. If you're trusting in how good you are, and this is a wrestling match, because every part of our being wants to trust in ourselves. Since that first sin where you too can be like God, I'm the one I can trust in. I'm my own God. The person who trusts in themselves, or even a religious person who says, look, I do a lot of religious things and I'm trusting that will be acceptable to God. The cross says you lie. The cross says it wouldn't matter how much good stuff you did. What you've done is cast yourself away from God. By not trusting in God, you put yourself as an enemy of God. And you have to stop and trust in me, says Jesus, in who he is and what he does at the cross. Same thing when we think of our trials and, can I make it? I don't think I can, this is going to kill me. You're trusting in yourself. You're trusting in your own feelings. And Jesus is saying right here, let it go. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in me. We make choices all the time that affect the way we live. As Christians, when we get tempted, you're going to make choices this week. There's something, whether it's in your thoughts or something you're going to say, some feeling you have that says, hey, I know God said don't go that way in your thoughts, or don't go that way when you put your hand to, whatever it is, and you're going to make a choice. Go with what I feel is right. Go with your feelings, or trust God who says, no, you might feel like that's the way to go, but it's wrong. You're going to make a choice. Who are you going to trust? Yourself or trust God? I think it would be better for me if I could just have a bit of this, God says no. Who are you going to trust? The idea of home, a home, is written on our hearts, what Jesus is talking about here. And through all the rapids of this life, we're always going to be restless until we get there in that room with Jesus. In my Father's house are many rooms. So right now, it's all planned. So that means either there's a room there for you if you've trusted in Christ, or if you don't trust and you're never going to trust in Christ, then there isn't any room there. So this is simple. You want to be certain that you got a room there? Trust in Jesus. Trust in Jesus. And it's there. Not because you feel it's there, because Jesus said so. It would not be a good idea to put off trusting in the Lord. You just might unexpectedly rock up to that motel with no vacancy sign, no trust, no vacancy. So let me just close by asking, what are you doing with this life? What are your hopes? Without hope, people give up. What's our hope? The power to live out this life to the full is to have hope for the future. And a few rapids along the way can't touch you if you've got your full hope. Yeah, what does the Apostle Peter say? Set your hope fully on the grace to be given when Jesus Christ is revealed. And the skeptics will say, well, look, you'll be so heavenly minded, you're no earthly use. No, if you've got that room booked and you know that that's the finish line, a few rapids ain't gonna knock you down. You'll just get through them until you get to that calm. Then you'll do the rapids again and calm until you get to that room. That's the greatest motivation we have. Store up treasures in heaven. Why? Jesus is waiting there for you. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you also may be where I am. Amen.